Hey guys, this is Joe Harper with Reformed Truther Ministries. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing footage from the great state of Iowa. So in today's video, it is titled Hunting After Giants in Iowa. Now, I went to 3 different locations in the footage I'm going to be showing you in a few minutes here. I went to the Putnam Museum in Davenport, Iowa, and then I went to 2 separate places to look for mounds. I went to what are called the Toolesboro Mounds in southern Iowa, close to the Mississippi River. And then I went to what is called the Effigy Mounds National Monument in eastern Iowa, and I'll be talking about more about what I found there in just a minute. Now, I specifically wanted to go to Iowa to research what are called the Davenport Tablets. Now, for those of you who do not know, the Davenport Tablets are tablets that were discovered in the 1870s by a man named Jacob Gass and his 2 assistants, and he dug them out of some mounds in the Davenport area. Now, they are currently owned by the Putnam Museum. That is why I went there. Now, what is interesting about these tablets specifically is that they appear to be very old in that they have inscriptions on them from 3 ancient languages. They have ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on it, and they have inscriptions in the ancient Libyan and Punic languages. Now, Punic is, when you think of Punic, hear the word Punic, you can think of the city of Carthage. Rome fought the Punic Wars against Carthage, so once again in North Africa. And that Carthage was a colony of the Phoenicians. Now, all of this is very interesting because it supports what I've said in earlier videos about how people from the Mediterranean world, specifically the Phoenicians, because they were the greatest of all seafaring peoples, they found their way out past the Mediterranean into the Great Sea of the Atlantic and found their way to the shores of North America. Now, these tablets found in these mounds built by what we call the mound builders, these tablets support that theory. Now, what happened though was, interestingly in history, when these tablets that were discovered by Jacob Gass were examined by scholars from Harvard and from the Smithsonian, not surprisingly, they deemed that they were, quote, a forgery or a fake. And they came to the conclusion that they thought that these tablets were, in fact, just a hoax, a joke that had been placed on Jacob Gass. And they believed that people from the Davenport Academy of Science had put them intentionally into the mounds to fool Jacob Gass. Now, I find that ironic because when you believe in things historically like the giants of North America, or you believe in the mound builders and you believe these mounds were not built by Native American tribes, when you believe those things, you're called a conspiracy theorist, or you're called, because you believe that the Smithsonian is covering it up. You're called a pseudoscientist, a pseudo-archaeologist, a pseudo-historian. What I find interesting, ironically, is that the theory put forward by these scholars kind of sounds like a conspiracy theory. Oh, it was an intentional hoax to put these tablets into those mounds. But essentially, I digress. But not everybody came to the same conclusion. Now, the man called Barry Fell, who wrote the book America BC, I talked about him in my Hunting After Giants in Wisconsin video. He comes to a very different conclusion about these tablets, and he believed through his extensive research of across the United States and North America, he had found proof all across North America that people from the ancient world did come to the Americas before Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492. And he had enough language training to examine the inscriptions on these tablets, and he believed that they were authentic. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from his book, America BC, describing what happened and describing his opinion of the matter. So, as I'm turning to this passage here, here we go. So this is what Barry Fell says. He says, one day in 1874, a Reverend M. Gass, assisted by 2 students, was engaged in opening a small burial mound near Davenport, Iowa. Near the surface, they found an intrusive Indian burial of obviously modern date, but as they descended deeper into the mound, they began to uncover the skeletons of the persons for whom the mound had initially been raised. There were 2 adult skeletons and a third skeleton of a child placed between them. Nearby, they found an engraved tablet, now known as the Davenport calendar stele. This was extensively engraved with strange signs, seen above, he has a picture, and came into the ownership of the Davenport Academy of Science, now called the Putnam Museum. It aroused much interest at the time. Later, it was all but forgotten, for scholars at Harvard and the Smithsonian Institution declared it to be a forgery. The main grounds for this opinion were that the writing could not be read by anyone, and that it contained some letters resembling the letter 0 or the letter O and the numeral 8, together with at least one N and one F, and some signs resembling Hebrew and others resembling Phoenician. For these reasons, the stone was considered to be worthless and a meaningless fake. Luckily, the Davenport Academy preserved the stones in spite of the various claims that it was a forgery. So I'm going to stop there. So the Smithsonian scholars and the Harvard scholars examined this tablet that was found deep in the mounds, and that's typical that you find. Sometimes you find bodies of a later date buried above bodies buried at an earlier date. That is not uncommon in relation to these mounds, because these are, even the people who later found them discovered that there was spiritual power around these sites and that they became sacred sites according to their religious viewpoint. That is not uncommon with sites all across the world, or with megalithic sites all across the world. But then they find the tablets deep down. Initially, there's a huge amount of interest around these tablets, but then, due to the scholarship of the Smithsonian and the Harvard scholars, they deem it to be a forgery. Now, what you have to understand is that the Smithsonian and Harvard scholars, they do have a bias due to their worldview, because they are entrenched in the dogmas of evolution and of what is called isolationism, which I've talked about in previous videos. The belief that people from the old world could not have come to the new world earlier than what is commonly believed. That the idea that people from the ancient world, such as the Egyptians or the Phoenicians or the Celts or whoever, could have made it across the Atlantic earlier, the theory of isolationism deems that that is essentially impossible, or at the very least, there is no evidence for that. So that is the worldview that these scholars are operating from. Now, Barry Fell, he examined these letters, these inscriptions on his own, and he did not see any reason to think that they were a forgery. He thought that the claims of the Smithsonian and Harvard scholars saying that they had numerals that resembled English letters, or that there was things that resembled Hebrew or Phoenician letters, he did not think that those doubts really held up to water. But I digress. But that's why these tablets are so important, because if, for the sake of argument, that they are true, that would essentially prove that people came over to the Americas earlier than they did. So for the rest of this video, first I'm going to show some pictures of them so you can see it for yourselves, and then I'm gonna move forward to show my footage that I got. So I went to the Putnam Museum. I searched all around the museum. I asked the employees that worked there if they were on display. They were not on display, so I was somewhat disappointed by that. I made all the inquiries that I could, but I still was able to. There was a small plaque in the museum talking about the mounds that are found in Illinois, so I'll show footage of that. And then I saw some Egyptian mummies and sarcophagus, which were really cool, and that's kind of ties into the Egyptian hieroglyphs found on this tablet. So that wasn't a total waste. But then I was somewhat disappointed leaving the museum, because I felt like I didn't see what I came down to find. But then when I got to the mounds at both at Toolesboro and at the Effigy Mound National Monument, I got some of the best footage I've gotten on mounds so far. When I got to the Toolesboro Mound, there was a parking lot I pulled in, and then not far off there were these two main mounds, and they were fairly large, and they were not dissimilar to what I had seen in other places. So I went and I filmed them, but then there were these woods behind the mounds, and you were allowed to walk back there. It was part of the area. So I walked back there, and I essentially went down this fairly sharp hill into this valley ravine like area. And there were more mounds back there, at least what appeared to be mounds. And then I was very surprised when I saw what appeared to be very stark Sasquatch tree structures. And I wasn't even looking for those. I didn't have any intention to do any research related to that in this area. And the one specifically that really caught my eye were these two branches that looked like they were tied together, like almost like the framework of a teepee. And this looks exactly like the pictures that I've seen online from very credible Sasquatch researchers. So I took some footage of that. I found some mounds in that forest back there. And then when I went to the Effigy National Monument, I pretty much had to climb up this, what was essentially a mountain. It was, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, and I had to go up this winding trail to get up to the path, and you walk through this forest, and there were more mounds there that I saw in all the previous sites put together. And then the one that I saw at the very end, which I'll show at the end of this video, which is called the Great Bear Mound. That's what it's marked on the trails. It wasn't the largest in terms of elevation or size that I've seen, but in terms of its length, width, surface area, it was as large as any as I have seen. And it was a pretty impressive mound. So I was really happy to find all that. And I feel like with all of the sites I've gone to at this point, even though it may seem to be somewhat repetitive just to show mound after mound, I feel like I've laid a really good foundation for trying to hopefully do more research and try to figure out try to find leads to look for the remains of giants. Obviously, I'm not going to dig into these mounds because it's illegal, but just trying to figure out what leads we can follow. And I feel like that going to all these sites has been the very important first step, and that's going to lay the framework for future research. So all that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this footage. I hope you enjoy the rest of this video.
So here we have the pictures of the Davenport tablets that we mentioned, and we see specifically that there are 3 tablets here in this picture. And the one that's going to concern us the most is the one in the top left corner of this picture, and this is referred to as the Davenport calendar stele. This was the stele that Barry Fell was talking about in his book America BC. So if we take a closer look at this specific tablet shown here, we see that there's a number of things that we want to look at here. The inscription on the top has the writing that Barry Fell was talking about in the excerpt that I read. But then we also see specifically, if you look at the bottom of this picture, we see a picture of the earth where we have people standing below it. And then this was very interesting to me. We have a picture of the sun and the moon, and then above it we have what appears to be what looks like the firmament, the solid firmament, the Raka from Hebrew cosmology or ancient cosmology. And this is interesting when we know that the ancient peoples of the world, contrary to popular belief today, believed in a flat earth cosmology. Now, if the makers of this tablet intended that intentionally or not, I don't know. That's certainly a question that can be asked. It's an interesting observation. But then, so we clearly have what appears to be Hebrew flat earth cosmology. We have what appears to be the Raka, and then above it, we have the 3 languages of the hieroglyphs are at the very top, and then the Libyan and Punic languages are below that. So that's what we have here in this picture.
Hey guys, this is Joe Harper with Reformed Truther Ministry. So today I'm in Davenport, Iowa, and I am standing in front of the Putnam Museum. And I'm going to be looking at the infamous Davenport Tablets that were discovered by the Reverend Jacob Gass in 1877. These were found in mounds in the Davenport area, and they have the inscriptions of 3 different languages on them. And after Jacob Gass found them, they were later examined by scholars from the Smithsonian Institute. And the Smithsonian, amongst other scholars with the evolutionary narrative of history, deemed that they were, quote, a hoax. So we're going to look at them, we're going to film these tablets, and we're also going to be going to the mounds in the Davenport area today, and we're going to continue to hunt after evidence of the giants of North America, and how we're going to try to show that these tablets were in fact our authentic tablets that were from the mound builders that came across the seas to North America many centuries ago. So stay tuned to see what we find.
Here in the Putnam Museum, we have this reference to the mounds of North America, which they claim were built by the Native Americans. And we see that this picture here is from Albany, Illinois, and that these are the famous mounds built by the mound builders connected to the giants of North America.
Of all the things I found in the Putnam Museum, the coolest things that I saw were clearly the exhibits they had regarding ancient Egypt. So they had a real mummy taken from Egypt and a sarcophagus, and these pictures here show what I saw. And I thought that it was especially cool, even though these finds have no direct correlation to the Davenport tablets, that the Davenport tablets do have ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. So it was cool to see these Egyptian mummies in person. That was pretty cool.
Hey guys, so I'm at the Toolesboro Mounds here in Iowa. I'm about an hour southwest of Davenport, Iowa, and we're gonna see these burial mounds that are located here. I'm very closely located to the Mississippi River, and I'm gonna see what we can find in terms of finding some mounds that were built by the mound builders connected to the giants of North America. So we'll see if we can find some giant mounds here. So I'm walking up to these mounds here. The one on the left here, it's a little bit farther away, is a lot bigger than this one, but both of these mounds are pretty large. So let's see once the camera gets them into view. I mean, this mound is as large, it's as large as a hill, and you get a little lower to the ground, you really see what you're looking at here. And then if I keep walking toward this mound here, this one is even larger. This one is the far larger of the two. I would say this one is as big as the ones I saw at Aztalan State Park. It's pretty massive. I mean, if you didn't know what you're looking at, you might just mistake it for a big hill. Kids would think, oh, I'm gonna go sledding down this, but this is a giant mound, so pretty cool stuff. So as I got this mound here behind me, as we're talking about in this video, the Davenport Tablets, we see that those tablets were found in burial mounds built by the mound builders centuries, if not thousands of years ago. And the tablets that Jacob Gass found in 1877 came from mounds in Iowa just like these. So all of this is really fascinating, especially when you understand that those tablets, they had inscriptions on them in 3 different languages, including ancient Egyptian, ancient Libyan, and even the Punic language, which was spoken by the city of Carthage and other peoples in North Africa. And that really supports the research done by men such as Barry Fell, who believes that cultures from the old world in ancient times came to North America and built the mounds. And we know from further research separate from Barry Fell's that those people who came over included the ancient giants. So you see here that I was walking through these woods. This is down a bit from those main mounds, and I found what really looks a lot like a Sasquatch tree structure. And when you look at this tree structure, you just look at how these branches almost form what looks like the framework for a teepee, and you see how it's so intricately connected together. And this is what Sasquatch researchers say you look for when you look for Sasquatch. I wasn't even expecting that coming down here to Iowa, but that's what I found. Wow. Come this way, you look at this. That one looks a lot like that looks like a Sasquatch tree structure too. So, and then behind that there's more mounds located. Pretty crazy stuff. This whole area is a giant, it's a giant ravine. And this area, it has mounds and it has what appears to be Sasquatch tree structure. So this is actually a much more intense type of area. I thought this was going to be kind of a tourist trap, but when you get down into the hills behind the 2 main mounds, it's very different than what I expected it to be. I'm in the woods behind those mounds I videotaped earlier, and I was really surprised when I found a couple different structures that look like Sasquatch tree structures. I talked about this in my video in Brainerd, and this is the part that gets me the most right here, is when you look at this, that looks like the framework of a teepee, and that's even more intricate and elaborate than the ones I saw in Brainerd, Minnesota. And then behind here, there looks like what appears to be more mounds. So I'm gonna go investigate that if I walk this way. But there's some crazy stuff here. These woods, it's up, if you're up top where I filmed before, it's kind of like a touristy area, but then you walk in these woods behind, it's like a kind of ominous dark forest, almost creepy stuff. So I'm just finishing up looking around here at Toolesboro burial mounds here in Iowa, and I've hiked these woods behind these mounds, and I found not only a bunch of mounds in the woods back there, but there was also what appeared to be potentially Sasquatch tree structures. And so these mounds here that I documented earlier, they're pretty large. They're not quite as large as the ones at Astalon State Park, the fully pyramidal ones, but they are still very, very large mounds. So there's definitely some mysteries in the state of Iowa, just as there are in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So all of that's pretty interesting. So I'm on my final leg of my journey here, and I am at Effigy Mounds National Monument. I am close to the Mississippi River here. I'm kind of working my way back north to Minnesota, and we're gonna see, there's supposed to be some mounds in a very scenic forest here, and I got an hour and a half till sundown, so we're gonna see how this goes. But we're gonna see if we can find some mounds before we get home here. We'll see how this goes. If you see here, we got a large, well, decent sized mound, and there's mounds up and down this trail in this forest, so we're gonna see what we find. I'm at Effigy Mounds National Monument, and climbing up to this forest, you pretty much climb up the side of a mountain, overlooking the river. It's pretty much something. And these mounds aren't as big as the ones I saw in Toolesboro Mounds down in southern Iowa, but they're still definitely noticeable. If you come up to this one here, you can tell you got that mound shape, and pretty much there was some back there that away. I think there's some more up this way, so I'm gonna keep walking a bit more, see if we find any more, and that'll be the end of our day today. So we got a mound here, we got a mound over here. This is footage from Effigy National Park here in Iowa, eastern Iowa. I got another mound over here, and these mounds are quite literally all over. I got less than an hour left of daylight. I got to get back to my car. But yeah, this has been quite an interesting day. I've seen some more interesting branch structures on these trails. Great Bear Mound, 1 mile. I'm standing in front of what is called the Great Bear Mound. The sign I passed back the trailway said this is the largest effigy mound in Iowa. Now this is the size of this mound. It's not so much the elevation, but it is the size in terms of its width, its length, its surface, the surface area. And this whole hill is the mound. And the sign is labeled as Great Bear Mound. So this, in one sense, this is the largest mound that I've seen. It's not the tallest in terms of elevation, but it is definitely the largest in terms of surface area. Wow. So as I'm standing here in front of the Great Bear Mound at the Effigy National Monument, the burial mounds here in Iowa, this brings me to the end of my journey today. I hope you've enjoyed as I've hunted after giants in the state of Iowa. Please stay tuned to further adventures as I continue to document things related to the giants of the North America and other topics. This is Joe Harper with Reformed Truther Ministries. God bless.
If you've enjoyed the content in this video, then check out Joe Harper's books. Ordering information is available at reformedtruther.com.